So today I wanted to speak a little bit about equanimity or Upekkha. And I'll just start this off by saying I owe a lot of the thinking around this to somebody named Jakob Hoey. He's somebody he's actually the center for he's the head of the Center for Consciousness and Contemplative Studies, where I do a lot of things at Monash. And he's a philosopher, and we've had discussions over the course of like many years about equanimity and what equanimity means, because he brings up a common concern with equanimity, that equanimity sometimes looks like indifference. And so we've had a lot of conversations about this over the years about what is actually the difference between that. So I think it's a nice thing to talk about it and just sort of bring up some of the concerns that are out there, because I'd say as well, like when we look out into the popular meditation field these days, equanimity is now actually starting to become this new kind of buzzword kind of thing. Basically, it's becoming like the new mindfulness. It's this idea that if you just develop this like state of equanimity, then everything else will be good. Everything else will fall into place if you just have equanimity. And the thing with equanimity, when you think about it like this, a lot of people think about equanimity as this isolated state, or this isolated modality of being, or a state or a trait that's it stands alone by itself. But if we think about equanimity in this way, what ends up happening is we kind of end up reifying it, and what ends up happening is a lot of problems fall out of that. And one of the biggest problems when you think about equanimity in isolation is it actually does look like indifference. It does look like something that is very, very detached, and there's no kind of engagement there. Because if the modern kind of instructions about equanimity is just allow everything to be as it is, just be present, don't react, don't judge to things. This really actually does look problematic in many kind of ways. So with something like that, you might notice suffering, but do nothing about it. If I'm just being not judgmental, if I'm not reacting to things, I can, the suffering's there, but I'm just not going to do anything about it. So this, if we're sort of reacting in this way, this isn't equanimity. This is a kind of cold detachment. This is what I call like disengagement. It's not Dhamma. So what I wanted to sort of cover today, and again, questions that sort of Jakob's that has brought up, is like what are the ways that basically we can develop more useful equanimity? What are the ways that we can develop equanimity in a way that it still ensures that we engage with the world? What is something about equanimity that like keeps it grounded in reality and keeps it grounded within suffering without like detaching and running away from it? And quite important one as well is that how do we move from some sort of contemplative practice, how do we move from that towards action? Because a common criticism, and you probably don't hear it much because you're in these kind of circles, there's a common criticism of contemplatives and contemplative practices, is that a lot of the times there's this view that contemplatives are just in it to understand their own minds. They don't care about anything else that's actually out there in the world. So what I want to talk to a little bit about today is as well as like how do we use contemplative practices to actually like to engage properly. And so, but the first thing we need to start with doing with all this is exactly what is equanimity. We have to define what it is. So most people know equanimity, obviously from the Buddhist perspective, is what we call Upekkha. Now, I did a little look on a popular online Buddhist dictionary this morning, and I found the at least the English definition of what Upekkha is, again from a Buddhist dictionary, and the definition is looking on with hedonic neutrality or indifference, a 0 point between joy and sorrow, disinterestedness, neutral feeling, equanimity. And so look, if you look at that definition, it's like, it's no wonder a lot of people like raise eyebrows about it. It's like, oh, that doesn't actually sound that good. You know, disinterestedness. Like that actually doesn't sound that good. So if we think about it just from this kind of definitional, like unitary kind of sense, it doesn't seem that good. But I think at its heart, and what we sort of mean by equanimity from this Buddhist practice, is it's a kind of evenness. Essentially what it is a kind of balance. So Upekkha is this kind of like balancedness of the heart. And if you think about what evenness and what stillness and balance is, it has to, like, for something to be balanced, it has to be balanced in relation to something else. It can't just be a unitary thing by itself. It has to be balanced. It has to be relational to other factors. And if we basically make equanimity just this one sole kind of thing, then it becomes, you know, I would say unbalanced if we're just thinking about equanimity as a unitary thing. So if we think about it in this kind of unitary way that's not in connection with other things, I think this is when it actually starts to lead to these problems that I've sort of brought up before, is that we end up moving more into this kind of, we're basically set adrift in equanimity. It starts to become disconnected from everything else because we're trying to develop it as this state where we're not letting anything in the world come into us in any kind of way. And this is what I think brings up these kinds of problems that are quite common in a lot of contemplative practitioners. One of the big ones is what we call spiritual bypassing, where there's some sort of suffering, but we just ignore it. We just ignore it in some kind of way. Or we treat people badly and then just go, well, I'm being equanimous. That's, basically it's their problem. Also, it can bring up a kind of apathy. It can bring up a kind of numbness. It can bring up this kind of disinterestedness. Now, and so the main point here is that from a Buddhist perspective, equanimity is not meant to be something that stands alone. Equanimity is actually something, it's in relationship to many, many other qualities that are in the mind, or that comes from the practice. And so obviously when we look into, say for example, we look into the early Buddhist teachings, actually we find equanimity in relation to things all the time. When we look at many of these different like kind of lists and taxonomies that have Upekkha in it, it's always in relation to other things. And like funnily enough, this is only something I really like noticed this morning, and obviously it depends on the list, but it's always listed as the last factor, which I might be wrong about this, as many Buddhists have so many lists. I'm probably missing hundreds of lists, but at least when I noticed where equanimity comes up in a lot of the big places, it's always the last factor, which was interesting. And so, the big one where you find Upekkha or equanimity is obviously within what we call the Brahma Viharas. These are metta, karuna, mudita, and obviously and Upekkha. So, kindness, compassion, and altruistic joy towards others. Equanimity is something in there. It's not a replacement for these things, but it's something that supports them. Equanimity is something that supports these other qualities and is supported by those other qualities as well. So it serves as this, as I said, it serves as this kind of balance. Equanimity again is a kind of balancing factor. So if you think of any one of the Brahma Viharas, if you develop one of those in isolation, it becomes destabilizing. So if you think of something like metta or kindness, if you just develop kindness in isolation, there's a lot of good things that come out of it, but there's also like downsides to it as well. One might become very like a doormat kind of thing. You're just being too passive. You're just having rose-colored glasses about everything in the world. If you're just developing compassion just by itself, you might be very, very motivated towards the suffering of others, but you could get this kind of burnout. Likewise with equanimity, if you're just developing equanimity by itself, it can lead to this kind of cold detachment from things. But if we develop these things together. So say, for example, we develop compassion and equanimity together. We have this kind of motivated care for any kind of suffering, but there is a balance behind it. It's something that has a kind of realism towards suffering, but we're still motivated to actually do something about it. So what we can look at when we have compassion, kindness, and equanimity is actually we can see that there is some sort of suffering there and what is actually possible to do about it. We have a kind of wisdom behind that. But again, these things need to be developed in conjunction with each other. Likewise, in another place that equanimity comes up in the suttas is what's called the 7 factors of awakening, or they call the Bojjhangas. And again, equanimity is one of the final factors in that. And there's the other qualities of mindfulness, investigation of Dhamma, like energy, joy, tranquility, and samadhi and concentration. And so you don't arise at equanimity by not getting those other things. You have to have all those other 6 factors in place there to actually get equanimity. And there's this interesting part of the 7 Bojjhangas as well. One of the factors is energy, effort, virya and equanimity. So you have to so that sort of seems incommensurate. Energy and effort and equanimity. But these things have to be together. We have to actually develop these together. So other places that it shows up is something called the 10 paramis, or the 10 paramitas as well. And I won't go through them all, but it's again, I'm pretty sure it's the last one. And these are, anybody that doesn't know what the 10 paramis are, they're qualities that we develop on the way to awakening. And so equanimity here also needs to be developed in conjunction with things like dana, generosity. It needs to be developed in conjunction with khanti and patience, and needs to be developed in conjunction with what we call adhitthana, or a kind of determination for things. So again, equanimity, it's not something that's developed in isolation. It's not this isolatory, unitary factor that we should be developing. It's something that we develop within a whole suite of other qualities of the mind. Each of these qualities supports and strengthens each other. Equanimity acts as a support for all the other qualities, and all the other qualities act as a support for equanimity as well. So what equanimity in this way actually is, it allows us to stay with things and not move away from them, because we have all these other qualities in place there. So in this context, equanimity is something that allows somebody to be stable and present with gain and loss, pain and pleasure, fame and disrepute, happiness and suffering. But this is a kind of equanimity and balance. It doesn't lead to passivity, or doesn't lead to disengaging from these, what we call the 8 worldly dhammas. It's an equanimity that also has kindness, and it also has compassion within it. It's an equanimity that has energy, and it has effort within it as well. It has perseverance, it has patience, it has tranquility within it. It has something that has an ethical standard within it as well, and an ethical commitment to do and to help out. And so this is a more rounded, more mature, more holistic version of what equanimity is from this Buddhist perspective. What it does, it keeps us able to be present with the suffering that is around us. But allows us to be present with this suffering and not be reactive towards it. It also allows us to not avoid it either. It allows us to actually be there with it. It allows us to be with the suffering and not try to push it away, not try to ignore it. It's something we can really actually make space for. We start to be with the suffering. We're not trying to push it away. We're not trying to ignore it. We're not trying to overcompensate. And so what it allows us to do is stay with suffering, not move away from suffering. This is what true equanimity actually is. You can be with suffering, not try to push it away. And so another like really important part of the Buddhist path that needs to be a kind of support for equanimity as well is something that we call right effort or samavayamo. And again, it seems incommensurate in this kind of way, effort, right effort and equanimity. How do you have equanimity or something that's still and seemingly passive, but also an effort there as well? So equanimity, it's not the opposite of effort in this kind of sense, in this Buddhist sense, because right effort from the Buddhist perspective, it's about the reduction of suffering. It's how do we reduce suffering? It's a kind of effort to reduce suffering. The Buddha said we do this by noticing whatever is unwholesome and working towards abandoning that or lessening that, or noticing if there isn't any wholesome qualities within the mind or the sin that is around us, and how do we work to develop that? So this is what right effort is. It's something. So therefore, suffering is something that we're actually engaging with. Again, we're not ignoring it. We're not pushing it away. We're actually engaging with some sort of suffering. Again, if there's some sort of unwholesome akusala element within existence, we work towards abandoning it. This is essentially what right effort is. And so if we do that, we need a kind of equanimity there as well. We need equanimity to actually be able to support this process of reducing suffering that's already there. It allows us to not, react impulsively to suffering. It allows us to not act out of craving of wanting it to go away. But it's actually responding where one has a kind of clarity and a kind of care and a kind of wisdom behind that. And so without equanimity, effort can really turn into some kind of frantic, confused effort to actually fix something. And in its worst case, what effort can turn into is a kind of self-righteousness. And this is a kind of self-righteousness where it's like it feels like it has to control everything and it has to fix everything that's wrong with the world or whatever. And when we have this kind of self-righteous kind of effort, then this is the sort of thing where we start to burn out. Because we can't control everything that's out there in the world. And actually we might even start to fall into despair. We might start to fall into numbness. We might start to fall into apathy. We might start to fall into going, well, it's just all too much. But with equanimity, this actually starts to turn into something that's more, once we see suffering, we can be with it. We can be more attuned to it. We can become more realistic about how we can actually deal with this suffering. It can allow us to start to begin by asking, well, what actually can be done here? What effort can I do to reduce this suffering? What's helpful right now? What is skillful? What's useful to do? And also, what is mine to do? What is in my control to be able to actually do about this thing? So, equanimity, it doesn't mean at all that we don't care about things. It means that we care and we want to reduce suffering, but we want to do this without any kind of attachment to the outcomes in any way. We can stay engaged with things by letting our caring not become self-defeating, but by something that again becomes engaged. It's able to be with that thing. So. And obviously this is not just about thinking about suffering of others and suffering of the world. This also relates to yourself as well and your own practice and your own mind. A lot of times, our bad habits, our kind of our sadness, our depression, our anxious thoughts and anxious feelings, we do everything we can to get away from them. But we obviously we can't get away from these things that are within our own mind. But equanimity, what this allows us to do is to, as I said, to meet our own suffering and be with our own suffering and be there with a kind of balance and patience. rather than getting reactive about it and trying to, the bad things that are in your mind, having a lot of guilt, having a lot of shame, having a lot of like harsh self-judgment or ignoring all these things. If we have equanimity, it allows us to sink into this thing, and it allows it to be like truly humanizing, because it's something that allows us to not only work on ourselves, but also work on things that are actually out there in the world as well. And so this is, again, where we're trying to reduce suffering, and we're not doing it through this kind of brute willpower of, I just need to fix everything in the world. It's a kind of helping that's actually coming out of wisdom. And so, now we sort of turn to this kind of last question of, well, how do we turn contemplative practices into action? How do we turn this into something where it is useful? Again, because there's this kind of criticism of people that get into contemplative practices, and a lot of times the observation is like a lot of them are just there to like look into their own mind. But, they don't sort of care about things that are in the world. Their main goal is look into the mind. And look, I think if we're all honest, we've probably all been that person at one stage. I know I was. That's the whole reason I started meditating, is because I wanted to understand my own existence. I honestly didn't care about anybody else. Just didn't matter. It's like, yeah, I'm sort of interested in my own conscious experience, and I want to get to the bottom of that, and what is it? So I think, a lot of people maybe kind of share this, we might sort of fall into this folly at one stage. It doesn't always mean that we're always there, but it does. I think at some point we've all fallen into it at some stage. And this is kind of understandable, because, our experience is incredibly interesting. Our inner world is really, really rich. But it's also, dealing with your own inner world a lot of the time is a lot easier than dealing with the messy, kind of chaotic world that's outside. So sometimes it's easier to just turn back inwards on this. But, really, if we think about our practice, think about Dhamma practice, it's never meant to be this thing where we're just retreating into some cave of the mind. If we look at the best example of this is the Buddha. The Buddha, he, after he became enlightened, he had that kind of intuition. It's like the Dhamma is something that's hard to become awakened to. It's going to be impossible for me to teach this to people. I should just stay and not teach. But actually, the Buddha ended up going out and teaching. He ended up going out and becoming engaged in the world. He, spent 45 years teaching, guiding all sorts of people from, the kind of highest nobility all the way down to, monastics, lay people, all people, all different kinds of people in society. He actually went out and was engaged in the world. The Buddha built a whole kind of social structure. If you look at the Vinaya of the monastics, he actually built a whole kind of legal system and social structure and ways of dealing with others in society harmoniously. If the Buddha was inactive, he wouldn't have done any of those things. If the Buddha was passive and not engaged, he would have just gone, society, we let it go. But he actually set up a kind of society, which is pretty, it's pretty inspiring to actually think of. So the real question here is, when we're thinking about, well, is contemplative practice just going inwards, and how do we actually move outwards? I don't think it's about thinking about, well, how do we do contemplative practices and then we act, or should we not do contemplative practices, or should we just engage in the world? I think it's more of a question about how do we use the practice that we have to engage usefully and engage well. And so I think the kind of way that we do this is through developing these practices that develop a kind of selflessness. Develop it through these kinds of practices that reduce our own sense of self, our own sense of ego, or our own sense of self-importance. if we work with these practices, we actually start to feel how much my own kind of grasping to my own self-importance and my own sense of identity, how much of a problem this actually is. This is the thing that brings up a kind of defensiveness towards things. It brings up a kind of indifference because it's like, I feel like I am the most important person in the world. And I think if you really look at yourselves and you really ask yourself that question, at the deepest level, we have this kind of feeling of self-preservation, of, that my existence is important. So these practices that allow us to, maybe not totally get rid of the sense of self, but at least loosen it, start to loosen up this idea that, it's just about me. These practices that aim at loosening this attachment to the sense of self they start to make us see that what we're doing is bound up with so much craving and so much aversion and so much ignorance, and that we're the most kind of important individual. This is the thing. If we start to practice with these practices that let go of the sense of self, we start to let go of some of those things as well. And the more we do them, this is actually when we can be with suffering more. We become more available to things because we're not driven by our own kind of ego of trying to push it away. We're not driven by our own ego of wanting to fix everything in the world. So we're able to, to be with it more, to be able to listen more, to be actually more engaged with the thing because we can be with suffering in a more useful, in a more useful way. So an example of this, just an example of in everyday life, you've obviously had to deal with people that are, sometimes are harsh towards you, that are sharp towards you. We've also, there's plenty of difficult people out there in the world. I've been, I'm talking about equanimity today, but I've been railing for about the last 3 weeks of my pet peeve at the moment is that people only come and talk to me when they've got problems. This is the only time people come and talk to me, when they've got some sort of problem and they want me to listen to it. So everything I get from Buddhist people is you all come to me with problems. This is all you ask me about. So my relation with everybody is all of your problems. So, how do you think that actually makes me feel? This is all you just you tell me your problems all, and I just sit there and I have to sit there and listen. Now, obviously, I'm being facetious. I don't mind listening to your problems. It's okay. It's you don't have to go, oh, I can't talk to Ajahn Sādaro anymore. It's he doesn't want to listen to us anymore. It's not that, but we can sort of think there's plenty of people out there in the world that maybe they criticize us. Maybe they just come and tell us all their problems. And if we do this without equanimity, if we sort of engage with these people without equanimity, we can get this kind of thing of well, that's their problem, I don't care. Again, you could all come and tell me about your problems and I could go, yeah, fine. I don't care about you. Would that be, would you want to come and talk to me if I was like that? If I was just I don't care about your problem. I don't care. Obviously, you're not going to want to come and talk to me about that. Or if somebody says something harsh to me, or, I can sort of get defensive and go, why is this, why did you say that to me? We can get defensive, we can get reactive. We can go, why are you coming and telling me all your problems? Would you want to come and talk to me if I was like that as well? It's what? I've just basically said that, but, would you want to come and talk to me if I was defensive? I'm why are you coming to talk to me about your problems? Obviously not. But with equanimity, this sort of allows us to be with this reaction with people. We can actually be with it. We don't push it away. We don't go, well, I don't care, I'm not interested. Or I don't go, well, why are you saying this to me? I can be actually with these people that have some sort of suffering. So instead of reacting to it in this bad way, I can actually truly be there with them, not in this kind of indifferent way. Likewise, if we start to think about the bigger things in the world, the bigger problems of the world, like climate change, systemic violence, all these different kinds of huge social injustices that are out there in the world, if we look at these without equanimity, they seem to become insurmountable. It's like it's too much, it's too big. And we start to become overwhelmed with them. We start to maybe tune out. We start to become numb to them. All you have to do is look at the news every day of like some of the atrocities that's going on around the world. And it's like, oh yeah, there's these starving people, but I'm fine. I'm just going to drink my coffee. I'm going to go on with my day. We become indifferent. We become numb to it. But that's without equanimity. But if we actually do have equanimity, again, this equanimity that's supported by so many different things, we can actually stay connected with the suffering, these bigger things in the world without tuning out. You can be with the suffering a lot more. It basically is the thing that allows you to say, it's like, yeah, this is huge. This is something that's hard. This is a problem that's actually meaningful in the world. And yes, I can actually do something about it. I might not be able to fix the whole thing, but there's at least something I can do. I can take a step to reduce this in some way because I can be with it. Again, if I'm just turning it out, I can't do anything about it. But if I'm actually able to go, yes, this is big, this is complex, this is suffering, this is real, this is meaningful, and I'm a part of it, so what can I do? So is there one small thing I can do? Can I be with it? Can I actually be able to deal with it in this way that enables us to actually act on it? Again, effort, right effort, reducing suffering. So equanimity is something that it's this kind of balance, it's this kind of stillness, but it's a kind of balance and stillness that has a movement within it. It doesn't sort of push us into this kind of, as I said, like the cave of the mind where we just ignore everything out there in the world. Again, it allows us to engage within the suffering that's there. Not because we're morally obligated to do anything, not because we're guilted into doing it, not because, we want to right all the wrongs of the world. We're actually able to do it because we actually have the wellspring of insight and compassion and a kind of balance within the mind that actually allows us to move into the world in this kind of way. Because we start to see all these kinds of suffering clearly, and we can sort of hold it there, and we're not responding with any kind of clinging, we're not responding with any kind of ego, we're not responding out of guilt or anything like that. And so I think this is the kind of true gift of what equanimity actually can give. It can be a kind of action. It's something that allows us to be with suffering, not withdraw away from it. It allows us to stay close to suffering, not run away from it. Again, equanimity is not this kind of thing, this kind of wall that we hide behind. It's not kind of this flattening out of feeling. It's not kind of this indifference or anything like that. But again, equanimity is something that allows us to say, well, yes, like the suffering is real. Yes, this suffering is true. Yes, this thing is big and it's complex and it has, and this thing is meaningful. But yes, there is also something that I can do about it in some way. And, obviously the world doesn't need more kind of like frantic attempts to help and just try to fix every kind of problem without this kind of balance, without this equanimity. What we need is sort of people that are equanimous, that are balanced. What we need is people that can see things clearly. What we need are people that can, not react in this kind of out of any kind of negative instance within the mind. We need people that can act without clinging to any kind of things. And if we are developing equanimity in this way, this is not indifference. This is the truest and best way to become free of any kind of suffering. So that's the talk for now. So that's probably a lot for you to take on. So yeah, I think I personally think it's quite an important thing. So yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble about it.
Thank you very much, Ajahn. We'll just look for some questions. One on the floor.
Thank you, Bhante, for the interesting discussion. Yes, the balanced mind, equanimous mind. That is the mind that is in peace, no suffering, wise, and understand anicca, dukkha, anatma in totality. That is a state of mind that exists permanently only in the Tathagata and the Arahats. However, that state of mind, according to Buddha, can be experienced by those who are practicing the spiritual path as temporary states. You mentioned that the Four Noble Abodes, Brahma Viharas, it is the last of it. And the Sattva-Bhujangas, that is the enlightened factors, the last of it. One may say that this is part of the four, part of the seven. However, it is not by chance that it happens to be the last. So that gives indication that all the other things leads to equanimity, rather than it is part of it. The final goal. So that is the mind of a Arhat. So all what you said about how it is not equanimous is what is relevant to us, for us who are in the spiritual path. Why is it not equanimous? Because we don't have a balanced mind. When you have when you look at things, when you react the mind with a baggage in your mind, that is you're judging, you have a self-view to a highest point. And as you said, now you get affected when people talk to you. You get affected because you are judging. You have you see yourself separately from the others. I mean, you are very honest and said what happens to all of us. So that is the mind of a unenlightened being at that time. So that is happens to all of us. So the mind that is imbalanced is the mind that is judging, using self-ego, and works like that. And so basically, equanimous mind is a mind of the Arhat. There's very simple definition. It's a state of mind that is seen permanently only in the Arhats. But however, we can work towards, and we can have these temporary states of Nibbana, as Buddha says, practicing that way with the other three noble abodes and the other 6 enlightened factors and paramis. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
No, they're good reflections, and it's again, it wasn't something that I'd noticed before, but it was only something. Again, I was just like looking for things this morning about it, and I was like, oh, hang on, like in all the lists, it's the last one. Like it's, I don't know if there's any kind of meaning to that, but I think you're right in that kind of way where it's like, we have to sort of like develop a lot of these qualities, and then we actually get to equanimity. That's a kind of, you could say more like a pure equanimity, and you do bring up of like the kind of quote unquote pure true equanimity is the equanimity of a fully liberated mind. But you're right, there is that way. It's like, well, we can like tap into that. We're not. None of us are enlightened. If you're enlightened, I don't know why. If you are enlightened, I don't know why you're here listening to me. Go home. You don't need to listen to me. But like, I think it is something that we can sort of tap into and aspire to as well. And I guess the thing that is like the kind of the take-home message about it is, well, it's also something that has to be developed with all these other qualities as well. But I think just as a point of clarification as well, as like I also think equanimity itself as well is something that supports the other factors too. So it's not like we need all the other, and I know you're not saying this, it's not like we need all the other factors and then we can get to equanimity. I think it's something that we can develop in tandem, and equanimity is something that helps support something like compassion or something like kindness. But then also kindness and compassion supports equanimity as well. So I think there's something that we can develop in tandem, but as long as we're doing it in a balanced way, then we don't fall into any of these, well, hopefully we fall less into the problems that, that having an unbalanced view of these things actually brings up. So yeah, good observations.
Thank you, Ajahn. We'll alternate the questions in the room with the online questions. Yep. We have a few of those. The first one's just asking for an explanation of the term contemplative practitioners.
Yeah, good. It's a very, very broad category. So contemplative practitioners are, anyone that engages in a contemplative practice, things like meditation, mindfulness, can be yoga. It could be within particular traditions. It could be within Buddhism or Hinduism or Judaism or Zoroastrianism. They got some cool practices, by the way. It's a lot of really interesting practices. But it also can be things outside of traditions, more secular or quote unquote spiritual based practices. So anybody that engages in these practices that aim to in some way understand something about existence. Now, you can throw a lot of things under what a contemplative practice is, but there's this element there. It's trying to develop some sort of awareness, trying to develop some sort of wisdom, trying to develop some sort of stillness within the mind. So things like like education and things like that, or psychotherapy. You can say, well, that's trying to. It might be looking like it's doing something that's like a contemplative practice, like it's trying to reduce suffering, or it's trying to develop wisdom in that kind of way. You probably wouldn't throw some of those things under what a contemplative practice is. It's more of these like specific practices that are like introspective, that are leading to calm and are leading to kind of insight as well. So yeah, anybody that does those, you could say, is a contemplative practitioner. So yeah, it's very, very broad. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Ajahn. When you start talking about equanimity, I sort of compare it with Stoicism, because I've been reading a fair bit of it recently.
Yep.
It seems that the elements and attributes are similar.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to comment on that, and comparatively speaking, is there any differences, right? Because to me, from this talk, I understood it as quite similar.
Yep. Yeah. So there's like in Stoicism, there's a lot of talk about like ataraxia. So ataraxia is this kind of again, it's kind of like equanimity as well, and like a lot of the Stoic reflections are around knowing what kind of knowing that so many different things are outside of your control, but you need to sort of stay engaged in the world as well. So I think there's a lot of overlap between a lot of the Stoic reflections and a lot of the Buddhist understandings about the nature of existence. I think they are different. So while there's a lot of similarities there's some differences in the practices. Now, from the Stoic perspective, it's like it's a lot of it's about like questioning and reflecting, on one's existence, contemplating it deeply in this kind of way, and again being very engaged in one's responsibilities, and then trying to act on that, then reflecting on it at the end of the day. There's also a lot of reflection on our own mortality as well. So that's a kind of that's a big one in Stoicism. And from the Buddhist perspective, it's like we have all those kinds of things as well, but also what we have is these ways of like, how do we still the mind as well? We also have these elements where it's like an ethical framework as well that are around it. So not to say one's better than the other in any kind of way, but there are sort of like certain differences with them. But the the Stoic contemplative practices are very much engaged in a kind of reasoning, contemplation, but without the stilling of the mind, and certain like ethical frameworks in this way. Whereas the Buddhist practice, it is like it does those things, and it also does this element where you're engaging in meditation and stillness of the mind. Yeah, I could be wrong on this. Like I'm not an expert on Stoicism, but they're some of my like first observations. But there are a lot of similarities. There's a lot of books out now of the relationship between Stoicism and Buddhism as well, that they do reflect a lot of the same kinds of values and principles as well. But some of the practices are a little bit different. I'd say that's all. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. The next question is, equanimity is recommended in order to overcome repulsion. Could an example of this be that, for example, one has a bad meditation, but instead of having repulsion, one says, good, well done?
Is that the whole question?
That is the question.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Is
cool.
that a good example of equanimity in action?
Is that a good example? So, yeah, for sure. That's a good example of, well, again, instead of going, well, my meditation sucked, that was a waste of time, you can go, well, that was fine. There was, maybe I learned something about it from that. So I think that's a good way to think about like using equanimity in your own practice. Again, it's not about going, that sucked, that was terrible, that was a waste of time, I'm just not going to do that anymore. It's about going, as you said, yeah, it was fine. Maybe I learned something from it. So there's a kind of equanimity there. It would be important to understand what you mean by repulsion, though. I think, so I don't know exactly what you mean, but one of the ways that maybe we see in the Buddhist canon about what repulsion is like repulsion towards different forms that are in the world, like bodies, material forms, having a kind of you could say, not a repulsion of like, i.e. I want to push the thing away, but more repulsion in this way of what we call samvega, samvega, that one is disinterested in these kinds of things. So equanimity is a support for that samvega in that way. Now, again, but that doesn't mean that it's just the state by itself. It's not just equanimity by itself. It also has to have all those other qualities there with it as well. So, being not repulsed by things in the world also has to have that kind of care, has to have that mindfulness and compassion and all those kinds of things behind it. So yeah, I think you can use it in this way in your own meditation, but as long as it's supported by a lot of the other qualities as well. Okay.
Thank you for your talk, Ajahn. I've been coming across similar veins of thought in terms of how equanimity manifests not just within the mind but also physically. Yep. And I thought I was wondering, so I've been doing a lot of satipatthana meditations in being aware of the 7 factors and replacing the aggregates. Yep. And I was wondering, is the precepts kind of like a physical manifestation of helping attaining that kind of level of equanimity, but also whether jhana is this, like first jhana is whether this sort of consistent state of equanimity. Right. Whether you might have thought of, like, whether that's something you've thought about. Yeah. Or,
I like this idea. I like this idea. Can you expand on like what you mean by the 5 precepts being a kind of outward kind of equanimity?
Well, I guess like through sense restraint, you're physically trying to. Sorry, a bit closer. I guess through physical sense restraint. You're kind of exercising that willpower within yourself. And at the beginning, it's like torrid, I guess. You're sort of battling against your own sort of mind and physical sense. But over time, you come to this sort of this neutrality, this sort of acceptance, and you see. You can start to feel and touch upon what other people are experiencing more within yourself, and you can feel that and that. But through equanimity, you can you get this sort of. It's not like a wall against you, but you can just hold those ideas and that pain and that suffering that other people have a lot more.
Yeah, cool.
It's like equanimity is like that space where you can just hold it for a lot longer, right? And, and not have it feel like it's yours, right?
Yes.
Because that sense of I is kind of it's you're sort of letting go of that I in a way, and you can just see it for what it is.
Yeah, I really like that connection, and I should have thought of it myself. But yeah, that connection between ethics and equanimity, and our ethical engagement in the world, and so with this element of, say for example, just from the Buddhist perspective, like the 5 precepts, there does need to be a kind of equanimity there, because the reason we maybe like fall into breaking the 5 precepts is because of some sort of desire, because of some sort of wanting or some sort of not wanting something. So equanimity there in this sense is very, very useful for our ethical engagement in the world. It also I'd say can help us like not follow those desires that can be destructive. So one kind of the way that we think about Upekkha, and you said like in the Satipatthana Sutta, is the not reacting and responding to like Vedana. So not there's like neither pleasurable nor painful like Vedana. So having that kind of balance between not wanting to go into pleasurable feelings or painful feelings too much, and not pushing those kind of away. So yeah, you're right. There's so many elements where like equanimity kind of fits into the picture of that thing, and that's why I was sort of saying that equanimity sort of needs to be supported by all these other things, because when you think about it from this Buddhist perspective, like it's part of the mosaic, like it's not the whole picture. So having that there, I think and seeing it in relation to all these other things, I think that's why it's so important as a factor, but not a thing in itself. But you're right; it can sort of lead to this, ethical engagement. And your second question was about the equanimity of the jhanas.
I mean, I guess is jhana being able to attain that kind of level of consistent
equanimity,
state of equanimity? Because I think I've noticed it in myself. Is like it just fades away. You get distracted, right? And I see it sort of when I see the other monks and stuff. It's just constant. Sort of.
Yeah. So there's all these really nice. It's sort of also bringing to mind some things that are in the Visuddhimagga about different kinds of equanimity in relation to different things. And I can't remember the exact terms at the moment. But there's things like Brahmavihara Upekkha, Jhana Upekkha, Kama Upekkha, Yana Upekkha, and all that. Again, I can't remember the exact terms, but it's Upekkha that's in relation to all these. So Upekkha of understanding about karma and sort of knowing what can and can't be done. And so the Upekkha, the jhana Upekkha there as well, it's like it's an Upekkha that's coming from the jhanas. So I think there's again, likewise with everything else, there's plenty of ways that like Upekkha fits into this. And so, for example, something with the jhanas is like there is factors of the jhanas that relate to Upekkha, but it also, I think, can have like a knock-on effect to other things. If one develops jhanas and develops stillness, it can sort of move out into a kind of stillness of speech, thought, and action as well. So I think you can get equanimity within these things, but then as a kind of knock on as well, if that makes sense. Yep.
Thank you.
Cool.
The next online question was actually stated. It's actually written as a statement. I'm sort of going to turn it into a question. Can equanimity be developed through catching random thoughts as they arise, so that you're constantly returning to the present moment?
Yeah. A kind of equanimity can be developed. So again, I think it's important for us to be careful about not throwing equanimity under this kind of unitary concept. It's a very, very dispersed concept that involves a lot of other factors. So I think a kind of equanimity can come about through, seeing the thoughts arise and pass away, and just go, okay, well, it's just something that's arising and passing away, and I can now just, if I can really actually see that, I can be in the present and just watch that thing happen. For sure, I think that is a kind of equanimity that can come about through meditation and watching one's own thoughts in that way. But again, I think we just have to be careful about the kind of equanimity that is being developed, or the kind of equanimity that we're talking about. What I'm advocating for is a kind of balanced and holistic and well-rounded equanimity. That is equanimity of that includes all these other factors, as opposed to just equanimity as a unitary state or a unitary feature. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have equanimity as a unitary state or a unitary feature when we're watching the thoughts come and go like that. But again, we also have to develop a lot of these other qualities around it. So, the question, the statement is right. A kind of equanimity can come about through watching the mind come and go like that. But we just have to be careful about what kind of equanimity that's developing, because sometimes that kind of equanimity without the supporting factors, that's the thing that leads to this kind of oh, okay, well, look, I constantly have thoughts about wanting to punch somebody in the face. I constantly have thoughts about wanting to steal things. I constantly have thoughts about how much I hate everybody in the world. You can just see those arise and pass away, but it's if you're not now doing anything about it, something's not all there in your practice. So again, if we're thinking about right effort, right effort is also about seeing the suffering or seeing unwholesome states that arise, and what can we do about it to abandon it. Seeing if there aren't wholesome states in the mind or in existence, how do we work towards developing them? So again, it's a good thing. Watching them arise and pass away, being more present, it's a good thing. But also, at some point, we have to also abandon and develop and put in effort.
Any more questions in the room?
One down the front.
Yep.
One down the front.
All look like this too. Let's start here.
Thanks, Sri. Thanks, Ajahn.
Yep.
So you can't treat equanimity as a unitary trait.
Yep.
Could you just please go through the other traits that you need to develop to support equanimity?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. So if we think about the traditional things that we find in the Pali Canon, obviously it's in the Brahma Viharas, the 4 divine abodes. So that's loving kindness, compassion, and altruistic joy, or confelicity. I'm trying to coin the term because that's actually what mudita means, but nobody's following it. Nobody gets on it with me, but it's okay. Yeah. Confelicity. Mudita means confelicity. Confelicity, to be with the joy of others. Anyway, don't worry about my trying to coin a new term. And there's the other, what we call the 7 bojjhangas. And these are mindfulness, inquiry into Dhamma, so like a kind of investigation of the Dhamma, effort, tranquility, Samadhi, and I'm forgetting the other one. Can anyone remember off the top of their head? Piti, yeah, like a kind of joy that arises. Also with the 10 paramis, you have like things like adhitthana, khanti, so like a kind of determination, patience, generosity, wisdom, all these kinds of things. So it's not necessarily just about here's all the other things that support equanimity. It's a whole suite of many, many different things that support equanimity.
So if you were just to pick 3 things,
yep,
what would you consider to be the 3 most important?
I don't know. Because it depends on the context. Because it would really, really depend on the context. It really depends on the context. What way were you trying to develop equanimity for a particular kind of situation? Is it something within your own mind? Is it something within the world? Is it something where you're trying to work on something within your own mind that would entail you developing more of one or the other? Or is it something in the world that would entail you developing more of one or the other? So I think it's, everybody knows I'm not very good at like short shrift take-home messages and the one thing you should remember. But I think it should be kind of developed in conjunction with a lot of these other things. And it really is context dependent about what other factor will support equanimity in that way. So sorry, I can't give you a soundbite.
Thank you.
There was one question here. We can just quickly do that question here. Yeah. Was there more online? Manga? Yeah. Hey.
Hello, Ajahn. If you think of equanimity in terms of mental clarity,
yeah,
can it be attained or enhanced through conceptualization or thinking about it?
Yeah. So there's a kind of equanimity that can come through reasoning. There's a kind of balance that can come through reasoning. Like at its in the best case scenario, that's what a kind of utilitarian reasoning actually would lead to. Now, it doesn't always lead to that thing, but it can clarity in this way of reasoning and contemplating and analyzing something and seeing the multiplicity of that thing. I think a kind of equanimity can come from that. So, but again, we're thinking about a kind of equanimity, not equanimity writ large. So I think having this faculty to be able to reason and analyze things clearly is incredibly important, but it also needs to be supported by those other things as well. But yeah, I do agree. It can be a kind of, you can arrive at a kind of equanimity through reasoning, analysis, and a kind of clarity that comes through that. Does that make sense?
No, that wasn't actually what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Would you say that, the Chinese Taoist term wu wei?
Yeah.
Action through non-action?
Yeah.
So not being attached to the result, just responding in an appropriate way to whatever's happening. Is that equanimity in your idea? Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting thing. I'm skeptical of Wu Wei because I think one needs a lot of other factors in place to be able to react appropriately and just allow reactions to come about. I'm very supportive of the spirit of something like Wu Wei. But actually, I do think it, and I think if we look at, and I'm using a very simplistic term of this, I think it does also need to be guided by reason, thought, action, compassion. We need to develop a lot of other qualities to be able to just act appropriately. Because I think at some sort of point you could go, well, any kind of action is Wu Wei. So I can go, well, this is a situation come up and I should act violently because this is the thing that is coming out of me. This is the natural thing that coming out of me is violence. But that's not always the most appropriate thing to do, acting without clearly thinking about it. I'm not down on the concept at all. I do think it's, I don't think there's a lot of utility to it, but I think we just sort of have to be, I think a lot of requisite qualities also have to be developed for Wu Wei to work effectively, if that makes sense. Sort of.
Okay, well, that was a good lot of questions.
Cool.
Very interesting discussion. So thank you, Bhante, and thank you everyone for raising this. So just the announcements. I just. Some of the usual things we're kind of progressing on. Vasa is underway, and various monastics are holed up in various places, but they still like to eat. Just a reminder, as always, that if you have the capacity to offer lunch dana, either directly or remotely, please have a look at the website and see if there are vacancies if you're able to continue. Today is the Kalyana Cleaning Day. It's cold, but it's not raining on us, so that's probably good. So again, if you have the ability to stay behind and help clean up around the place, be from 12:15 or so for an hour. If you're able to do that, please do so. And then in regard to, now Dr. Jaya, I haven't got this on my list today, but I think that next Sunday being the first Sunday of the month, it will be the lay discussion, sutta discussion, will it not? At 12:30, yes? Okay, so that's next Sunday after Dana. There'll be a lay discussion on the suttas. And then in regard to next week's teaching program, this coming Monday, Ajahn Sādaro will be here. He is continuing to front up on Friday night as well, so session 3, I believe, in the Discover Buddhism. Tuesday night's our usual layperson meditation. And then next week we have Ajahn Nisarano, so it will be the monthly meditation day. So on Saturday the 2nd of August will be led by Ajahn Nisarano, who will also attend, provide the Dhamma talk on the Sunday and also for Monday night. So he'll have a busy weekend. And that's it for the announcements, other than, as always, to invite people, if you're able to, please come and join us for the lunch dana after this. And Bhante, if you'd like to formally close.
Will do. Okay. So we can pay respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivade Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Good. Okay, so I'll see you all over there for lunch, hopefully.